Are you good at creativity? Well, the answer might differ. But just in case you think you're not a creative person, there is some good news. You can actually become creative. And how can you do that? By following a framework. So the framework I'm going to talk to you today is called the 6 thinking hats. What is this framework and how do we use it, both in terms of coming up with creative ideas and also generating better ideas? So let's understand more about the process of being creative using the 6 thinking hats. So the 6 thinking hats is a method that was identified or invented or proposed by a gentleman called Dr. Edward D. Bono. So let's get to know more about the person first before we get to know about the concept. So there you go. You have Dr. Edward D. Bono there. He is also called as the inventor or the father of lateral thinking, which is a method that many people across the globe tend to use in order to think differently and think better. And he is attributed as a leading authority in the field of creative thinking. And he has developed several frameworks which have helped people think differently and think better. So one of his foremost inventions or theories was the 6 thinking hats, and that's precisely what we're going to focus on. So without any further ado, what is the 6 thinking hats? It's a thinking tool that allows you to think from different lenses. So there are 6 colors, and each color of the hat represents a manner in which you think. So the first one is what we call as a white hat. So essentially, the white hat focuses on facts, figures, and data. Now, what does that mean? A lot of times when we look at a project, let's say, for example, you and your team members are discussing about a particular project, and you're wanting to know whether it's the right project for you to invest your time, energy, resources, etc. Now, if you just think about it, you might not be able to make a decision. But if you have the facts and figures to support your claim, if you have evidence, documentary information, it makes your job a little bit easier because you can now make your decisions based on certain figures which actually indicate something. So whether it is investing in the stock market or for that matter in the world of sports, many a times we tend to look at the past performance figures to identify which players would do well on a particular day, right? Or for that matter, even in terms of predicting weather. So whatever it might be, numbers play a vital role in helping and shaping our decisions. So whenever you start discussing on any particular decision, ask yourself, what data do we have here? And that data will be helpful in making a critical decision much simpler. So the first hat is the white hat. The second hat that we look at is the red hat. Now, sometimes data can either give you mixed results, or for that matter, data by itself may not be sufficient, especially when you're taking decisions which are meant for people or decisions that involve a little bit of emotions in them, right? We all make decisions which involve some kind of emotions. So the red hat basically talks about thinking about your decisions also from an emotional lens. Now, I know a lot of people tend to believe that we need to be emotionally detached, but let's be honest about it. As leaders, many a times we have to make decisions which have to involve an emotional angle to it. We need to be more empathetic, we need to be more grounded, and we need to also take into consideration the emotions that are involved there. And with emotions, I mean your own emotions as well as the emotions of other people. For example, you might want to stop incurring expenditure on a particular facility to your employees, but you also got to make into consideration that if you stop giving that particular benefit, what is the emotional impact or repercussion of having made that decision? So that is where the red hat comes into picture, which compels you to think about emotions, intuitions, and gut feeling. So that's where the red hat becomes really, really important. Then comes the black hat. Now, black hat is a very interesting hat because a lot of people that I know tend to look down upon the black hat. The reason being the black hat talks about negativity, it talks about pitfalls, it talks about risks, and it talks about even flaws. But having said that, you need to look at what may not work. You need to look at what may go wrong. And in fact, that's a great way of thinking. It also is something which is very popular with contrarian thinkers. Who are contrarian thinkers? People who tend to think against the popular opinion. So the black hat actually is a very important hat in that context because it allows you to think completely opposite in a contradictory manner. So, for example, you see that everyone in your team is gung ho about a particular project, but you see certain loopholes which others might have ignored. Then it's important that you wear the black hat and you talk about the loopholes that you anticipate in the project going forward. So that's where the black hat becomes absolutely important. So never ever ignore the black hat. The color is black, but the intent is really good. So let's understand that before we jump to conclusions. So use the black hat wisely. The next hat is the yellow hat. Now, the yellow hat is all about optimism. It's all about excitement, and it talks about what can go really well if we do this. Let's say, for example, if you have to invest in a particular project, what are the pluses? What are the benefits or advantages that we're likely to reap if we invest in this particular project? So what can really go well if we take the decision to invest, if we take the decision to back a particular project or a particular person or anything it is that you want to do? So the yellow hat is very, very optimistic in its appeal. It talks about smelling the roses and looking at the brighter picture. And it's also something which will help you make certain bigger bets, because a lot of times when you take bigger bets, you need that optimism. You need that surge of excitement to take that important call. Let's say, for example, if you're talking about setting up another plant for your organization in a remote location, you got to ask yourself, if we actually go ahead and do this, what are the future benefits that we can anticipate for the organization? How will it provide us with a competitive advantage? And how will that help us become a market leader? So these are questions that can be answered using the yellow hat thinking. Optimistic, exciting, and something that you really look forward to. But at the same time, the yellow hat is realistic as well. It's not about unrealistic thinking. It's about thinking what really might happen. So there is a lot of practicality that is associated with the yellow hat. So try using the yellow hat as well. Here's one of the most important hats, which talks about creativity. So if you're using the 6 thinking hats in terms of trying to be more creative, then this is the exact hat that you're looking for. It's the green hat. And the green hat talks about enhancing creativity. It talks about how can we look at things from a different lens. So, for example, if you're stuck with making a particular decision and you're looking at what have you done in the past, perhaps there's an opportunity for you to look at what is it that has never, ever been done, and can we try to do that in the forthcoming project? So the green hat will actually push you into thinking creative ideas. So this is also an opportunity for you to brainstorm and come up with original ideas. Now, some of these ideas may not work. Some of these ideas might be outright garbage, but that's okay. As long as you generate quantity of ideas and then separate the wheat from the chaff, you will be in a much better position to come up with something truly original. And that's the whole idea of the green hat, is to come up with original creative thinking by thinking outside the box. So the green hat will go a long way in helping you come up with those kind of creative ideas. And last but not the least, you also have the blue hat. Now, what is the blue hat? The blue hat actually is a culmination of all the hats that we saw earlier. It is about the big picture thinking. So the blue hat says, do not look at an idea in an isolated manner, because each color might have its own biases. Therefore, the blue hat says, let's look at things holistically. And the blue hat will exactly help you do that. So it focuses on the big picture. It helps you collate all the ideas that you've gathered from the previous thinking hats. And that is how you can make better and informed decisions. So these are the 6 thinking hats that you could use the next time you are going to make an important decision. Here's a quick summary of all the 6 hats. The first hat is what we call as a white hat, which talks a lot about data, facts and figures, information that will help you to make a decision. Then we talk about the red hat, which is more about the emotions, the feelings, the hunch, the intuition factor. The black hat, which talks about what can go wrong, looking at the potential problems and therefore preparing for how can you go about countering those problems and solve them. The yellow hat, which is more about optimistic thinking, looking at what are the benefits that are possible if we go ahead with an XYZ decision. Then comes the green hat, which talks about thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, pushing yourself to zones and areas that you might not have anticipated earlier. And finally, you have the blue hat, which brings every hat together, which looks at the holistic part of it, which allows you to do the big picture thinking. So these are the 6 hats. So how do we get started with this? Well, my suggestion to you is do not wait for a very important decision to use the 6 thinking hats. Pick up any mundane problem which is applicable in your routine life and try to apply the 6 thinking hats. The possibility is you might fail, but that's okay. Who cares? You have to practice the 6 thinking hats to be able to use it when it comes to even crunch matters and important decisions, both personally and even in your professional career. So the whole idea is to get into the habit of using the 6 thinking hats. So try using the 6 thinking hats, and I'm sure it will put you in a much, much better position to come up with original ideas, creative ideas, and of course, better decision making. I hope this helps you in terms of making the right choice. And if it doesn't help you, that's not the end of the world, because the 6 thinking hat says that as long as you keep experimenting with it, you will come up with something original and something that you can put to practical use. So try it and do let me know how was your experience. Thank you so much for listening.